everyone, and welcome back. I am Pamela DeRitis, and today I am talking with Uli Dendy. She is the owner of TrueLanguage, a business translation service, and Annette Boyle. She is a medical writer and owner of Cultivar Communications. Today we're going to be continuing our conversation about the challenges, the benefits, and some trends we see with medical writing and translation. Welcome back, ladies. I'm excited to continue our conversation.
Thank you.
Annette, dovetailing on what Uli just mentioned as far as the challenges of medical translation, what are some regulatory considerations that you have to take into consideration, that you have to work with?
Right. Well, being precise, having the accuracy, making sure if you're talking about clinical results in particular that it's exactly phrased the way that it is, that it's not making claims. And, coming from a marketing background, sometimes that's a little challenging. You want to say, oh, it's the first and only. And,
Yes.
and if you can't audit it, you can't say it in a regulatory environment, right? So, you have to be very clear about what is your audience, where are they in the regulatory process, the end of period where the FDA is saying they can't talk about their results right now, or are they looking for funding, are they in a quiet time? There's all kinds of regulatory issues that are affected by where they are in the whole process. But mostly it gets down to, not overclaiming, making sure that you only say what you can back up and what you've already provided. And that's just looking at it in English.
Right.
I'm sure in other languages, I've never had to be concerned about, well, what do the Chinese regulators have to say about it and how do you deal with them? But you have, sure.
So our subject matter experts are aware of the regulatory requirements. However, they change quickly and they're different from country to country. So our translators may point out, oh, you need to be aware of this. Right. So then we go to our client and go, okay, for the EU, we need to be aware of this. Still, we cannot put all of the onus on the translators. We work with strategic partners. That's all they do. They know and they are on top of the various regulated requirements for different countries at any given point in time. So if our end client needs this service, we work with strategic partners who can provide it to us. But most of the time, our end clients will work with somebody directly because they know it's they have to be in compliance.
And speaking of working with different countries, I imagine there are cultural implications that you need to take into account. Probably, you, Uli, probably more than you, Annette, but you need to be aware of those things as well. So talk about some of the cultural sensitivities that you need to have in your work.
Yes, and this is where working with a writer, with a content creator is optimal. We oftentimes say, we cannot quite convey this message as you conveyed it in English. We need to adapt it to our culture, to our audience. We will maybe perhaps translate it in such a way. It may not be a direct translation. We make the client aware, we make the writers aware that we may deviate from the source content in order to get the same message across, but that is culturally appropriate.
Right.
And some of that, can come down to very basic things like what pronouns are you using?
Yes.
I mean, is this only for women? And in your market, would only women be providing the instruction for other women?
Yes.
And and obviously the visuals that would go with that. I mean, that's beyond our scope of what we're talking about. But the visuals then become really important in terms of that cultural sensitivity.
And I've heard now. Definitely not an expert in this, but certain colors may be on or off limits, on the table or off the table for certain cultures. Do you have to, I imagine you don't really run into that as you're not doing design, but do you have to take things like that into consideration, or?
Most everything we translate, we also typeset, so we do work
So you do
with the source materials. We provide printer-ready files to our clients. So yes, we do look at images and we look at colors, and the translation team will flag it if there is an issue. not often that we run into it, but especially in the sense that you just brought up with women and women only. Yes, there's a high sensitivity.
So I also want to talk about technology and how that's changing the field. Let's first talk about general trends. It could be technology, it could be something else. What trends do you see happening in medical writing, in medical translation?
For medical writing, and again, something that Uli and I were talking about earlier today was the transformative impact of genomics and the omics generally now, proteomics. It's just what we're finding and applying on smaller and smaller scales, and how important that is to the overall health and in identifying cancer or what the microenvironment, and that requires a level of precision and a knowledge base that that's harder to come by.
Right.
If you're writing about a health and wellness device and you're tracking your respiration or you're tracking your heartbeat, everybody knows what that is, right? But increasingly, even those devices are getting very technical, and again, it's important to get it right and to know really what you're talking about for it, which can require quite a lot of background, a lot of conversation with a client.
Interesting.
I love it, yes. And so again, scientific research requires a different level of expertise. And to then have a linguistic team that is qualified to translate something like that, it becomes harder and harder to find the right people to qualify them, to keep them.
One of the things that I was thinking about, that we were talking about phrases earlier, we talk a lot about organs on a chip. All right, now I'm not quite sure how that will translate. Is it organs on a crisp in England? What would it be in other countries? How do you get that right?
And so if the linguists are not familiar with the English expression, they will always ask, what is that? How is it intended to use? And then we'll come up with, a lot of times linguists these days, depending on the language, will adopt the English. And there will be blah, 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 organs on a chip.
Right.
We'll just keep it in English.
Okay.
And I've found, just in my studies of different languages, not medical, but that there are English phrases that pop in, like with French sometimes and with Italian sometimes. It's interesting. And you're like, oh, I know that word.
It's true, but it's true for many applications, but maybe not so much in the scientific area.
And then I think the other technology that's making obviously a lot of chatter, so to speak, it was like ChatGPT, looking at AI and all of the different applications. One of the things, again, we were touching on was double checking that accuracy.
Yes.
Having done some research recently on it where that showed up that there was a vaccine that does not in fact exist, but gave me the dosing and the name. And you've got to be constantly aware and double checking your sources and making sure that it's accurate. And when you're looking at that across more countries and more languages, it just multiplies the issue, sure.
Yes, but I am excited about what technology brings to us as far as tools. So we can translate more content faster. We have, especially when it comes to quality assurance, AI can really help us find consistencies. We talked about creating a glossary earlier, and there are tools out there and where terminology mining becomes easier and easier. They may do that for you, and then you then develop the glossary based on that, but you just saved hours and hours of work for just the terminology mining.
But it's, I think you had said before, kind of an iterative process, right? You pull it, but you can't just go with what you find.
It is a tool that will help you to work smarter.
Yes. And I think that's the key with a lot of AI these days. A lot of people are concerned, and rightly so, will this replace my job? Will this do what I can do for my clients much more cheaply? but you've hit on something very important where it's not bringing back necessarily accurate results. That does not take the human out of the equation. That actually necessitates a human being to read through and fact check and make sure everything is accurate and that the vaccine actually exists.
Yeah,
things like that. Mm-hmm. That are, I think it will be a tool that you can use, like you said, Uli, but it's not going to take the human being out of what you do.
Right.
And it's still crucial.
Right. There's a term that we use, and it's called the expert in the loop. You have to have an expert in the loop.
Absolutely.
Right. And even, beyond accuracy, just the, there's AI or bots that will scrape 10Ks, 10Qs, and put out the information in a release. And a lot of times, that's enough.
Right. Yeah.
But I read one last week where the key information of layoffs and a restructuring for this company were totally missed. It was like, they're up 0.7% from last quarter. I'm like, not the relevant news. So for that, you really need a person who knows what's the trend, what's happening in the industry, what's going on behind the scenes with this company.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. We're a long way off from ChatGPT or any other AI being able to replace people, and let's hope we don't ever get there, because I would like to work with human beings. Okay, so last question for either one of you: where do you see your businesses going? Where do you see the industry going? Any future predictions that you have?
I'm excited about global communication and how it enabled us to just communicate all over with anybody in the world. That is something that I think we'll get better at it, and we'll get faster at it. There will be more information for everybody. So so more content, more languages. I'm excited about that. More information sharing.
And I think, building on that, there is so much information out there, and some of it's great, and some of it's not so hot. And I think it makes it more and more important for your materials to stand out, and for your materials to be very accurate, to really target your audience in a clear, compelling, engaging way. And it's easier now. We have so much more information. There's so much to convey. But as we see with devices, you've got wearables, you've got all this kind of information, and so much of the real challenge there, of the real value, is taking that data, all of that information, and making it so it's useful to the end user. And whether that's an audience where you're trying to sell your product, or regulars where you're trying to sell your product, or or just the user to, okay, so what does that mean, and should I call my doc today? That's a very exciting opportunity for us.
It sounds like it's a lot of science, but it's also an art.
Yeah.
And you have it down. I mean, you know how to work with each other. You know how to translate material into the appropriate language for the audience. So it's amazing what you've been able to do. I'm glad to learn about it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies, for joining us. I really appreciate your educating me, you're educating our audience. And speaking of the audience, where can people find you online?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn at Annette Boyle. It's ANNETTE, Boyle, BOYLE.
And you can find us at TrueLanguage.com. That's TRUE language.com.
Great. TrueLanguage.com and Annette Boyle on LinkedIn. Go look for them, find out more about their services and how they might be able to help you.